Loewenstein. He joins us from Sydney, an independent journalist, author of, amongst other books, Antony, The Palestine Laboratory, and you've also lived in occupied East Jerusalem. Let's talk about the West Bank in a moment. First of all, these countries that are recognizing the state of Palestine, the recognition was supposed to come after a ceasefire. Now they're saying they'll use it to secure a ceasefire. But they're still doing business with Israel. They're still selling it weapons.
And that's the key point. There was an interesting article, a very revealing article in the New York Times this week, and I'm paraphrasing the headline, something like, Europe is talking the talk but not walking the walk. In other words, the European Union, which is Israel's biggest trading partner, has been for years, is doing very little. Yes, there are countries like Spain that are cutting certain weapons deals with Israel, and I salute them for doing that. But overall, the Europeans are divided. There are countries like Hungary and others which support Israel uncritically. Germany is pretty much in Israel's camp. And the UK, which is now, of course, not in the EU anymore, but has recognised Palestine, as is my country, Australia. But ultimately, as you say, what does that mean? I mean, the conditions upon which this Palestinian state is supposed to come into fruition is just delusional. I can think of no state in modern history, maybe ever, that the conditions, including by Macron, who talked about it today, was it should be demilitarized, that Hamas should have no role in that state. Now, I don't have to be a supporter of Hamas to say, sorry, who's making this decision? A former colonial country like France telling the Palestinians now who they can and cannot vote for. A demilitarized state means, in practice, that Israel would control the land, sea and air borders, which is exactly what happened with Gaza from 2005 when they removed their Jewish settlers. So this is kind of fantasy land. And while you have at the same time Mahmoud Abbas, the man living in his gilded cage in Ramallah in the West Bank, saying how rapt he was with the possibility of Palestine existing. These people live in a fantasy land, a parallel universe. And the truth of the matter is that the Palestinians themselves, not talking about the corrupt leadership, in the West Bank and Gaza, they know that symbolic recognition will do little to nothing to change facts on the ground without concrete action.
So we're talking about external factors here, and the recognition and the need possibly for more, like sanctions, etc. But what about within the internal dynamics of Palestinian politics? And there doesn't seem to have been possibly enough convergence between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority that would show the Palestinians that we have a unified leadership which is on the same page when it comes to dealing with the threats that we face.
Look, Israel has spent decades, really literally decades, in a divide and conquer method, classic colonial tactics. In other words, making it almost impossible for there to be a unified Palestinian perspective. Let's not forget, one of the key policy plans for years by Netanyahu was to literally allow money to go in suitcases into Gaza, this is before October 7, to support the Hamas government because they regarded Hamas as a viable alternative to the Palestinian Authority. Divide and rule. I mean, the fact that fact alone should make any comment coming out of Netanyahu and the Israeli government's mouth as absurd. I mean, they literally were paying money with Qatar's assistance to Hamas for years and years. So you're right, there is no unified Palestinian entity. There are certainly Palestinian parties that fundamentally oppose both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Some support them in the West Bank. Recent polling certainly suggests virtually no support for Mahmoud Abbas and his corrupt leadership, more support for Hamas. In Gaza, the picture is more complicated, understandably. Gaza no longer exists, so there are a lot of people who are angry at Hamas. There are some who support it. It's a mixed picture, but the idea that you are prescribing now Western states who should rule Gaza into the future, in my view, and again, it's Palestinians' decision in the end, there will need to be eventually some kind of far stronger, more independent Palestinian political entity. But that is arguably impossible to create and build and develop when you are under permanent occupation. And I mean, there are very few examples in history where that's possible.
And here exactly the point is that do you believe that the expansion of illegal Israeli settlements over the past, let's say, 20 years, and it may well have been a policy of Israeli governments, knowing what these expansionist policies of settlements would mean for the future of a two-state solution? Many people are saying it will make a two-state solution almost impossible.
Well, that's exactly been the point. I mean, it's not even a secret that the Israeli state believes that and says that. I mean, whenever there is some so-called unilateral Western move to recognise Palestinian state, for example, the far-right Israeli government says, well, in response or as so-called punishment, we'll expand settlements, we'll annex. I mean, let's be clear. Anyone who spent any time in the West Bank, and I've been going there on and off for over 20 years and was living there for a number of years, annexation has basically happened anyway, de facto. It's not official, sure, but annexation has happened. I mean, there are essentially now 800,000, give or take, illegal Jewish settlements and settlers in the West Bank under occupation. Those people are not going to be removed, and the Israeli government plan is 1 to 2 million. Far, far more. I mean, again, we come back to this same question. Recognizing Palestine means there needs to be a Palestine to recognize. And right now we are seeing Gaza obliterated, and the West Bank, I fear, going in a similar direction. And Western tears from Macron or my Prime Minister Antony Albanese or others will do literally nothing to stop the current carnage and genocide in Gaza and increasingly in the West Bank.
Antony, thank you as always. Really appreciate you spending time with us. Antony Loewenstein in Sydney.
Thank you.